Welcome to Everyday Woodworking, the podcast where we connect the art of woodworking with your everyday life. Whether you're a seasoned craftsman or just starting out, we've got you covered with tips, tricks, and insights to help you create something beautiful. I'm Ricky Fitzpatrick, your guide on this woodworking journey, and I can already smell the sawdust. So grab your tools and let's get started. It's time for Everyday Woodworking. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Everyday Woodworking. Today we will share a quick tip for precise marking, talk about what we've got on the workbench, which is part one of a refinishing project on an oak veneer dresser, and we'll be taking a listener Q&A about removing wood labels. So, without further delay, let's get started. Our quick tip of the day: when the mark matters most. One of the handful of old school tools that I keep either in my tool belt or nearby in the shop is a carpenter's pencil. And it's not only like a timeless must-have thing in the workshop, but it is one of those kind of manly throwback items. Kind of makes me feel like I'm staying true to my craft, when I use it. But let's be honest, sometimes you really need a precise mark, and that fat carpenter's pencil is just not accurate enough for every job. So when that happens, you can always opt for a nicely sharpened wooden number 2 pencil. I keep one of those as well. And I keep an old schoolhouse pencil sharpener handy as well, and I love it. But the tip is so delicate on the pencil, and any little thing can nick it off, and then you got to go back, you got to sharpen it again, and then it breaks, and then you go back again. So I have to confess, it's taken me a while to come around to the manliness of it, but to be honest, nothing beats a mechanical pencil when you need a consistently sharp point to mark with, and a cheap one, like a buck for a handful of them. That'll do just fine. And just get you one, keep it handy for those super close, super precise measurements. Chances are it won't be your all-the-time pencil. Rough surfaces like unsanded wood and reclaimed lumber, they'll break the lead every time. But for smooth surfaces, the mechanical pencil can be a game changer. On the workbench, Oak Veneer Dresser Refinish, Part 1. This week we're going to take a look at Part 1 of a recent furniture refinish where we tackle all the prep and repair work that is so important for any refinishing project. On this, a client had asked me to apply a stain to a 1990s style dresser. It seemed like this was going to be a pretty straightforward project, so I said yes. I loaded it up, brought it home, and I figured I would make short work of this. But then I noticed that the finish was an oak veneer, which terrifies me. Frankly, I'm not terribly well versed when it comes to veneers. All I know is that they're just not my favorite. I tend to shy away from them, probably because I'm afraid I'm gonna cause it to start peeling away or split, or sand too hard and go down through it, and then I'll have to replace the whole thing or just throw it away, So most of the time I just don't work with veneer projects. And not knowing how or if the veneer would even take a stain, I told the client that I suggested that we just go with a painted finish on this. They were happy to do that, so that eased my fears a little bit. We went ahead and proceeded like that. Now at this point, I knew we'd have to do some scuff sanding And when you do the scuff sanding, be careful you don't go too deep, especially if you've got a veneer. You don't want to damage the veneer. And then after I scuff sand, then I knew then I would put on a couple of coats of paint and then the wax over that. So that's seeming to be okay. We're back to pretty straightforward. The next thing we did on this is we started removing the hardware. Then we took all the drawers out. FYI, some people like to leave the drawers in. I don't understand that. If you're a flipper or a refinisher and you prefer to leave the drawers in on a project, I'd love to hear some thoughts from you as to why, because it befuddles me. I don't understand that. So you can comment here with that, or you can email those to me. And I would really love to know. Anyway, the next step was to give the whole thing a really good cleaning. The dresser was actually wound up being mostly poplar, so that was good. But the hardboard that made up the bottom and the back was a problem with moisture. The bottom was really warped to the point that we just took it out and threw it away. The back was fine, so we left it. I just cleaned it really well, and I made sure not to get it too wet during the process. The rest of the piece, we took the shop vac to it, top, bottom, inside, outside, and especially underneath. Then I just used Clorox cleanup wipes and paper towels to finish wiping everything down. Again, inside as well as outside. The metal drawer hardware was fine, so I just sprayed some graphite on each one of the runners to ensure a smooth glide for the drawers, and then we checked them all for a tight fit against the frame. There was a center foot under the bottom, kind of in the middle on the front, mainly for looks, but in theory I think it was there for additional support in the middle of a very wide span. That had gotten knocked loose in moving around, so we glued and reattached that, and didn't find any other noticeable nicks or scratches or anything like that. After that, then we got to sanding. With my random orbit sander, I did an all-over scuff sanding with 150 grit, and that was it. Nothing else after that. Nothing really aggressive there, but just mostly let the weight of the sander and some slow passes do the work. The trim did require some hand sanding afterwards, just because of the shape of it, but just enough to give the paint something to bite into, After sanding, which took about, 15-20 minutes, then we blew everything off with the air hose, inside first, then out, then wiped everything down first with, I use like an old t-shirt, then go back with a damp paper towel and I grab all that loose sawdust. Some people might like using a tack cloth. Personally, I just don't like a tack cloth. And I'm not going to get too deep into that right now. Maybe we can do that on another show, but I just don't like it. I don't like the feel of it, and I feel like it leaves too much of itself behind. I'm just not a fan, so, and maybe I'm not using it right, so we can get into that later, though. But anyway, I just used an old t-shirt, then damp paper towels to grab all that loose sawdust. At this point now, we're ready to paint. And that is going to be, bam, that's going to be part 2. And this is it now for part 1. And so that is all the prep and repair work just to get ready to give this guy a coat of paint. And anyway, it's at this point moving along really well. And anyway, I hope this has been helpful so far. Be sure to join me next week when we go into part 2, which will be the painting and finishing and finalizing of the whole process. Listener Q&A, removing wood labels.
Whoa!
This week's listener Q&A comes from J. McKinney 0832 from our YouTube channel. He said, he or she says, I saw your video about using a butane torch to loosen Home Depot wood labels. I don't really want to take the chance on scorching my boards, so what other ways could I get these off? Well, Jay McKinney, thanks for your question. There are actually several ways to get those pesky labels off. Frankly, I wish, and just as an aside, I wish they'd put those barcodes on the ends of the boards. That would make a lot more sense, but that's a battle for another day. Some of the time, the labels are just barely hanging on. And in those cases, you can just peel those off like with your fingernail. If they happen to be a little more stubborn, which the majority of them are, or if they tear on you when you're pulling them off, then you can always use a pocket knife or a box knife to scrape those things off. A loose razor blade is perfect for doing that, but obviously be careful. The loose razor blade could be potentially pretty dangerous. Finally, if a torch makes you uneasy, then maybe a heat gun, that would definitely do the trick. I use it. Sometimes I use a heat gun in the wintertime because it just gives me a chance to warm my fingers up a little bit. But just a second or two of a heat gun on the label and that thing will come right up. One thing I've noticed, though, about using heat, whether it's a torch or a gun, is that it tends to leave more of a gummy residue behind. I'm assuming because the heat liquefies the label adhesive and then it re-solidifies when it cools back on the board. But if you have to deal with this, or to be honest, if you're left with residue after removing the label in any fashion, then a quick wipe with like an old t-shirt with some mineral spirits on it, that should take it right off. And I hope that helps. And again, Jay McKinney, thank you very much for the question, and thank you for checking us out on YouTube. That's wonderful. And if you, my fine listeners, if you have a question for us, please let us know. You can email your questions to me at ricky@avfga.com with the subject line Everyday Woodworking Q&A. We need your help. No, I'm not about to ask for money. I need your input. I'm working on a new segment called Cool Tools, where we take a look at some of history's coolest and unusual tools, and I need your help with some suggestions. They can be woodworking, preferably, but they don't have to be. They can be old, but they don't have to be. And they can be odd. And yes, they do have to be. I want them to be odd and unusual and things maybe you've never heard of. So send me your suggestions. I need suggestions for some cool, old, funky, little-known tools that we can research and share on here. And if we use your suggestion, I'll be sure to send you something really cool in return. Send your ideas, email them to me at Ricky, that's RICKY, at avfga.com with the subject line Cool Tools. Well, again, thanks for joining us on this episode of Everyday Woodworking. I hope you found today's tips and insights helpful and inspiring. And remember, you can find all the episode details, show notes, and tons of downloadable project plans on our website at www.avfga.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your fellow woodworking enthusiasts. And of course, please contact us with your woodworking questions and suggestions. We would love to hear from you. Until next time, keep your tools sharp and the sawdust flying. This is Ricky Fitzpatrick signing off until next time, right here on Everyday Woodworking.